You listen to me, you go to the top. You don't listen to me, you're never heard from again.
The Sledgehammer Wrestling Show.
Heyo, and what is up, wrestling fans? Thank you so much for tuning in back to the channel here today, and we had a completely different show planned for this moment in time, and then the news came down the wire about the passing of the greatest wrestling manager of all time, my favorite, my idol, the man who has inspired me to follow my current path in life and try to be as good of a Bobby the Brain Heenan as I could ever be. And Bobby the Brain Heenan has left us, and I'm glad that he is no longer suffering. I know he's had a very long and hard last few years, battling throat cancer, having his jaw removed. It was a rough go for the Brain during these last few years. He definitely didn't deserve that. A man with such an eloquent way of speaking and such a high level of intelligence and such intellect and such a quick, sharp wit to be seen the way he was in his final years was truly something that was very sad. My name is Nick Nightmare. This is Blue the Snowball Microphone, and we are here to talk about that today. We will also get to the other news that we have, and it is kind of relevant as it has something to do, and we could link it with Bobby the Brain Heenan. But before we really get into it, I just want to take a minute and this is a little harder than you originally anticipate. 40 years I've been watching wrestling, and I've never seen anybody better. And without any more delay, let's show my little tribute to Bobby the Brain Heenan. Every so often there comes a person in your life that will just completely just change your way of thinking. And Bobby the Brain Heenan was definitely one of those people. For me, as a young man, I always wanted to be managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan. I just viewed him as the quintessential person to lead me to the top. Although historically he's never really gotten his guy to the top. He was always trying to take down Hulkamania. He had the biggest, baddest man on the planet, Andre the Giant, at his side and at his disposal to try to do so, and he failed. Even with Andre the Giant to finally get his hands on that World Heavyweight title, who just could not get that belt into the Heenan family. Bobby Heenan would manage a stable that is a virtual Hall of Fame in and of itself, with the likes of Mr. Perfect and Ravishing Rick Rude, the Brainbusters, King Kong Bundy, Big John Studd, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, Hercules. The list goes on and on. I mean, just to even think back at all the people he's had. Haku. King Haku, nonetheless. He managed the King Harley race. None even better, he was the whole catalyst for the arrival to the WWF of Ric Flair. Bobby the Brain Heenan's place in history is cemented, and there's almost no way to truly pay tribute to a man of his stature. You know, I've been saying on this show recently, you know, I'm looking to get into the wrestling business. You know, my time to wrestle is come and gone, so I wanted to emulate some of the great managers of the past. Guys like Jimmy Hart and guys like Paul Heyman, and most notably, as I've been on record saying, I wanted to be the second coming of Bobby the Brain Heenan, because there has been no better manager that I could think of. Maybe Paul Heyman comes close. You know, Heyman actually has world heavyweight champions in his stable, and he could talk better than almost anybody that there is. But Bobby the Brain Heenan, in his whole entirety of his career, from his beginnings in the AWA with Bockwinkel and Stevens, all the way through his WWF run, where he was, like I said, managing some of the absolute best in the world as far as heels during the whole golden age of wrestling. And then he would even reinvent himself again, going on to be one of the greatest commentators you would ever hear, one of the most amusing and funny guys behind that table for WWF on Monday Night Raw, and then following on WCW Monday Nitro. His voice is all over pro wrestling. There's no escaping it. His influence down in WCW was not very high. As if it was, it probably would have succeeded a lot more, but he did his job. He's been on record many times saying how much he hated working at WCW, and one of his happiest and proudest moments was coming back to the WWF and calling that gimmick battle royal at WrestleMania X7 or 17, whatever you decide to call it, and which was one of my favorite moments. It was a shit battle royal. It was absolutely crap. It was full of a bunch of old timers who were way past their expiration date, and the only reason it was entertaining in any form was because of the pairing of Mean Gene and Bobby the Brain on commentary. And he's just been the absolute greatest talent you could ever want. If you had anybody that was half as good as Bobby the Brain Heenan, you'd have a bona fide superstar. He really, really was the precursor to all of these. I mean, you've had guys like the Grand Wizard before Bobby Heenan really became who he was, and he was loud and boisterous and very flamboyant. You had Classy Freddie Blassie, Captain Lou Albano, all these guys who had their thing, but there was just something about the Brain. He just seemed to be what he called himself. He was just smarter than everybody else. He always had a plan. The plans never came through to full fruition, as I stated earlier, but you know, you can't win them all. And no matter how good you are, sometimes, no matter how good you execute the plan, the talent you have just can't get it done. And that was Bobby the Brain Heenan's one, you know, craw in his cap. You know, it just could not win the big one, no matter who he had. But my thoughts and prayers are with the Heenan family, the actual Heenan family, and his wrestling family, because I'm sure everybody, every single one of them is feeling it. I know I'm feeling it. It's very hard to even be doing this right now. It's one of these moments that I did not like to cover on this channel, as nobody really likes when this happens, right? You guys hate this shit. I hate when legends pass away, when anybody passes away, whether or not I like them, or, if you're a pro wrestler and you're part of a community and a family of people that I enjoy, you don't want to see anybody get hurt. You don't want to see anybody go away, no matter how hard he might have been suffering. His daughter states that he has been sick for a while, but this did happen quite suddenly. They were not expecting it to take this turn as it did, and I could only hope that everybody is dealing with it as good as they can. I know death is not an easy thing for anybody, and I hope that the WWE does something appropriate tomorrow night and Tuesday. Not just a stupid banner that says in memory of Bobby Heenan. Let's see some highlights. Let's see a nice little package, because he is one of those stars from the 80s and 90s that are just bigger than wrestling. They're actually bigger than wrestling. He's right in that category with Randy Savage, Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant and Bobby the Brain Heenan, their names are almost synonymous with one another. But Andre didn't start out that way, but his most famous and most world-renowned program was when he was managed by the man we affectionately call the Weasel. Unbelievable. Very sad. And I know he's up there having a drink with Monsoon and a couple of gallons of wine with the big Andre the Giant, who he loved to death. And that's the only saving grace I could take from it. He's out of his suffering, he's out of his misery, and he's hanging with his buddies in the big, big arena around that ring in the sky, which we will all be at one day. And prayers and thoughts to the families. And God bless you, Bobby the Brain Heenan. You've been missed, and you will continue to be missed. And I know that echoes throughout the entire world of professional wrestling. Wow. Back to the matter at hand. What we were originally going to talk about before we needed to address the passing of the legendary Bobby Heenan at 73 years old. Something that Bobby the Brain Heenan used to do very, very well was called WCW pay-per-views, and it seems as if the WWE are going to dip into their little candy bag of trademarks and start bringing back some WCW-themed pay-per-views. Let's try to do this with a little more gusto, because no matter how down I am, this is pretty exciting. This gets me a little excited. WWE officials are getting close to putting their hand in the nostalgia basket once again and using old labeling for a few live event specials in the very near future. As you may recall, the WWE ran Clash of Champions last year and has used the Great American Bash as a WWE show from 2004 to 2009, and also once again in 2012 as a one-off SmackDown special episode. It's unclear exactly which events they are looking to run at this point. But looking at the present time of year, it's worth noting that the next few WCW pay-per-views on the calendar would have been Fall Brawl, which features War Games, Halloween Havoc, World War III, and Starrcade. Now, before we go absolutely berserk off on a million tangents about how great this would be, I severely doubt this is going to happen. Maybe they'll pull one. I doubt it'll be more than one within the next calendar year. I know Vince hates using stuff he didn't create. That being said, Fall Brawl with War Games, I've been begging for a War Games since the merger. Why Vince hasn't seen the value in that specific match type? Maybe he feels it's better than what they came up with the Hell in a Cell, because it is. War Games is fucking fantastic. It's a Survivor Series match inside a steel cage with elements of the Royal Rumble, because you come in one at a time. It was the Royal Rumble before there was a Royal Rumble. Fall Brawl was first. It was fantastic. It featured many, many battles between the Four Horsemen and a team captained by Sting or a team captained by Luger, and it was a who's who of wrestling legends that have taken place inside the War Games. Absolutely tantalizing to think that we could get a War Games. Maybe implement War Games at Survivor Series. How about that? And then you have the War Games match as part of the Survivor Series tradition from this point on. 4-on-4, 2 cages, 2 rings. Fantastic. I'm all for it. Let's do it. Even more so, as we've said many times on this show and on this channel, I would love nothing more than to see Halloween Havoc brought back, especially at this moment in time, as the next Raw pay-per-view. The next Raw pay-per-view being Halloween Havoc would be able to feature guys like Bray Wyatt and Finn Balor and Matt Hardy, and would just absolutely sell itself just based off the characters alone that are going to take place on that pay-per-view on that night. It would be a thing of beauty. I don't really care for World War III, and that one I hope they do not bring back, which means it'll probably be the one that they decide to bring. So let's hope that that doesn't happen, because the one other thing that I never understood, especially when Dusty was still around, is why they did not see the value in bringing back a Starrcade. And in this moment in time, when you can have Starrcade, and you can have that Starrcade feature an athlete with the name of Flair, it almost is just a no-brainer. Imagine leading up or following WrestleMania, wherever they want to stick it, maybe right before the Royal Rumble, you have the debut of Asuka at Starrcade, right? And then at the end of the night, you have Charlotte Flair versus whoever the women's champ may be at the time, maybe even Natalya. So you have a Flair versus a Hart at Starrcade for a championship, and the winners got Asuka sitting at ringside waiting for her. Are you kidding me? I know they're moving Asuka to Raw, so that wouldn't really make much sense, but if you unify the women's division into one, it doesn't really make much of a difference now, does it? Which is what we always hope that they decide to do. But can you imagine that? Charlotte Flair versus Natalya for the championship at Starrcade. Flair and Starrcade are synonymous with each other, just like Dusty and Starrcade would be synonymous with each other. We don't have Cody Rhodes around anymore, which that would be a great place to bring him back if you had that on the calendar, and you end up enticing him to come back. You have the debut of Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare, at the pay-per-view that his father helped create. Starrcade is WCW's WrestleMania. So by them not using that brand, and by updating it, modernizing it, and bringing it to the new generations of fans, you are missing out. We don't need to see a pay-per-view called Hell in a Cell. We don't need a pay-per-view called Money in the Bank. We don't need these gimmick pay-per-views like the Elimination Chamber. Because it also makes it hard for guys like us to talk about that match. Because I have to say the Hell in a Cell match at Hell in a Cell. And it's just stupid. Where we can have a Hell in a Cell match at Fall Brawl. Makes much more sense, doesn't it? The Elimination Chamber this year at Starrcade. Come on. Let's do it. If there is any validity to this statement, they need to get on that shit right away. October is right around the corner, and to have Halloween Havoc would just absolutely twist my nips. It would twist them in a million bazillion directions, and I would be over the moon. And I cannot wait to see if this is true. Starrcade, Halloween Havoc, Fall Brawl. 3 must-haves. What they'll probably do is end up bringing back the Great American Bash. Maybe they'll do a Bash at the Beach special for the network. Perhaps they'll do a Road Wild or a Hog Wild. Are you kidding me? Maybe we'll do an uncensored, right? These are the pay-per-views they're going to end up giving us. All these B-level WCW sold-out bullshit pay-per-views. Instead of giving us their big 3. Because Vince has got an ego that's about as big as 3. 3 baboons. Gigantic baboons. The size of King Kong baboons. If he's even a baboon. I just said baboon way too many times. It's late. I've been drinking and I've been sad because of the news at the top of the show, as everybody's going to be talking about it, so we had to get it out there. Hopefully, like I said, we see some of these WCW pay-per-views in the WWE lineup coming this year. Most of these pay-per-views were made extra special by the presence of the great Bobby the Brain Heenan, and that's going to do it. We have nothing else really to talk about. We are going to go be sad by ourselves, alone, and mourn the passing of our friend and mentor, in a way, because I've studied the man for years, And if I ever get the chance and I'm given the opportunity to follow in his footsteps and manage anybody in the world, I hope to do him proud. That's going to do it, you guys. My name is Nick Nightmare. This is Blue the Snowball Microphone. This was a difficult episode to do. Thank you for sticking with me through the whole thing. We are going to wrap it up right now. We are out of here. And thank you for watching, and we will see you next time, hopefully with some much, much happier news right here on the Sledgehammer Wrestling Show. Rest in peace, Brain.